Welcome to episode 1 of Behind the Mic with Nash. We're going to have all kinds of things that we're going to talk about, and it's going to be a podcast about Texas Red Dirt music and Texas Red Dirt music scene. We're going to find out who's hot each week. Also, over the period of this, we'll have conversations with industry insiders, like folks that control the charts, folks that are business managers, promotions people, things like that, and kind of find out some of the frustrations that they have. And also, we're going to have behind the scenes in the radio portion of the industry. And I've been in that for 34 years. And I've just about seen it all. I've seen it morph into many different styles and kinds of country music over the 34 years that I've been around. I really started loving radio back in 1989, I guess it was. So I guess I will just kind of start out way back when I first caught the radio bug. I had been dinging around and playing in open mic nights as a singer for several years after I got out of the Army. I guess about 3 or 4 years after I got out of the Army. My wife at the time decided that, I didn't want to do that anymore. So she decided that for me. So luckily, I'd always wanted to. I'd always kind of had the radio bug, I guess. Even when I was a kid, my dad had a pool table in our family room, and I'd play my dad's records and put a breakdown cue stick, and I'd put that in the pocket of one of the pool table and put on headphones and play records and act like I was on the radio. And the station that I always listened to is KEBC in Oklahoma City, and I don't know why I caught that radio bug way early in life. And of course my dad, being a big portion and a big part of my music career, and really the style of the kind of music that I really love the most, that started way back when I was very young. And we used to listen to Stonewall Jackson and Marty Robbins and Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson and Patsy Cline and all of the old stuff, Merle Haggard, of course, and then it kind of morphed into the Texas music more with Jerry Jeff Walker. Really was my first taste of Texas music, and so that was always cool to me, and I always wanted to be able to do that. I thought, man, if I could just get on the radio, I would love to I think I could do really good at it. So as I was growing up in school, all my report cards my mother used to always get, and I had this little thing over here of practices self-control, and it always had little effort on it. And then out next to it, it says, talks too much. Well, when I got into radio, my mother said, you definitely got into the right business, that is for sure. So when I decided that I didn't have the talent to be a singer-songwriter, I pretty much knew that, and I didn't have the it factor that everybody looks for in the music business. So I decided, I'm going to get into radio. So I decided I was going to go to broadcasting school, and I started going to broadcasting school, driving from Purcell, Oklahoma, all the way up to Del City, Oklahoma, at night, going to radio school. So in the meantime of that, a little radio station, KBLP, in Lindsay, Oklahoma, was doing a live broadcast one Saturday, about a week or two maybe after I started school. And I knew about this radio station, and I thought it was really cool. They play country music. I love that. It was neat. So I went to one of their live broadcasts, and I got to talking to the owner, Charlie Jones. He was out doing the remote broadcast that day, and he told me, he said, for somebody like you that's young and just getting into the business, he goes, why don't you come down to the radio station and let me teach you what I know about it? I'm like, all right. So evidently Charlie had owned this radio station for many years and did quite well with it. And so I thought, what have I got to lose, So I started going down to the radio station during the daytime, and hanging out down there and learning. And man, he threw me right in the fire. I mean, literally, he just threw me in and just taught me. He was teaching me everything as I was going along. And I'm much easier doing hands-on stuff than I am book learning. Just that book learning thing has never worked out well for me. So if you can show me how to do something once or twice, I can get it done. So he started teaching me all this stuff, and I ended up spending evenings and stuff at the radio station, and I was missing school and all of this. So this rocked on there for several weeks, and then finally I just decided, you know what? I'm learning more at the radio station than I am going to broadcasting school. I was learning quite a bit at broadcasting school, but he could teach me how to do a commercial. Back in those days, we had to record a commercial on a reel-to-reel recorder, and then when you had to edit it, you actually had to use the tape and razor process. You know, you cut it, or you mark it in one place with the pencil and mark it in the other place, cut that out, and then tape that tape back together to make the edit. So he was teaching me all of that stuff, and I was just absorbing it, man. I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my career. So I quit school. I thought, man, I can just do this, and I'll get a gig, a part-time gig or something, you know, and make ends meet with the family and everything. Well, literally a few days after I quit school, it was coming up on Christmas time. We were about 5 days away from Christmas. We had bought some gifts for the kids, and in the meantime, I was like, well, this is going to be Christmas. 2 days afterwards, he calls me about 7 o'clock one night on a Wednesday night, and 1 week before Christmas. And he says, hey, the 7 to midnight guy here walked out. Do you think you could do this 7 to midnight every night? I go, yeah, sure, I can do that. I had never been on the air ever in my life. He says, all right, I'll tell you what, come down tomorrow evening, and we'll get you started and show you the ropes and how to do it, and I'll turn you loose. All right. So I had a gig, and it paid. And that was awesome. My first paid radio gig. And it was neat, you know. It was back in those days, that's the way radio was done, you know. You get these people that want to learn, and you get them in the radio station. You teach them the proper way and the right way to do it. This was all before computers and all of that kind of stuff. This is back when we actually played records and CDs and carts. If you guys don't know, that are listening, don't know what a cart is, it had all different durations, lengths as far as tape in there, anywhere from 30 seconds all the way up to 10 minutes, and it looked like an 8-track tape is what it did. And you had put it in this special machine, and it had a segue tone at the very end of that would fire off the next element. So yeah, it was just everything in the world he was teaching me, I was learning it, I was absorbing it, and I loved it. I had my first gig. Man, I was so excited. Christmas is going to be awesome. And the funny thing is, the weird thing about this is, 2 days before Christmas, I was working, and I loved it. I thought that was so cool. It happened to be a Sunday night before Christmas, and we heard this knock on the door. So my first wife and I, we got up and we went to the door, and there was nobody there. But there was a porch full of toys for the kids. And I don't know where it came from. I still to this day do not know where it came from, but I vowed right then and there that I was going to do everything I could in my radio career to help children. And that's what my whole drive has always been in radio, is to help kids. There's a lot of less fortunate children out there in the world that struggle, you know, and it's a crazy world we live in, but my drive is always to help kids. So I had a gig. Man, it was awesome. The guy that was doing afternoon drive, about 2 months into doing this, afternoon drive guy, 3 to 7, he was leaving the radio station. The two guys that worked there mainly doing the morning show and then the afternoon show, they'd both been there for a long time. So the guy that was doing the morning show, he was going to leave. So the guy in the afternoon was going to move to mornings, but they needed an afternoon drive guy. And Charlie loved my excitement. the excitement that I brought to the air and the way that I presented things and the way that I laughed and cut up but was serious at the same time. So he offered me the afternoon drive job. I said, sure, man, I would love to do that. By this time, I had 2 months worth of experience. I was rocking and rolling, man. I was, so to speak, shitting in tall cotton at this point. Started doing that, and we were doing shows, doing intro shows first, and we had actually, let me digress here. We had a segment on in the morning show, and it was an interview segment. So Charlie decided that it was going to be a good idea for me to go to the Rusty Spur in Marlow, Oklahoma, and interview Aaron Tippin. Was big at that point. He was just coming out, actually. He'd been out, I think he had 2 singles out at that point. And so he sent me over there with his little tape deck recorder and wanted me to record a 30-minute interview. Back in those days, it was pretty easy. You were at the radio station, you get with a road manager, boom, you're up on the bus and you're recording an interview. It was easy. So that was pretty cool. And then, you know, I was rocking and rolling there, and then the next show was John Anderson. John Anderson was cool. He was one of my favorites because, man, I had all of John Anderson's albums on cassette at that point. We had cassettes. We were cool. So I had all of John Anderson's music, and I just loved his music. So he was my second interview and my second intro on stage. Well, one night in the crowd happened to be a guy named Bill Reed. And Bill Reed was an on-air personality in Dallas. And he was making the move to KEBC in Oklahoma City, and he happened to be at the show in Marlow that night. So he and I got to chit-chatting and talking. And he told me, he said, hey, man, if you ever want to and want to try this out, he goes, maybe you could do some overnight gigs on the weekend up at KEBC. I was like, oh, really? I said, man, that would be awesome. So he and I talked about how KEBC was always my dream job, man. That's what I wanted to do. About 2 months rocked along there, I guess, and I finally called. I'm about 6 months into my radio career at this point. I called Bill. I said, hey, Bill, I want to try out that overnight on the weekends gig. He said, all right, well, come on. So I went up, met him, and we talked and chit-chatted a little bit, and he put me on the schedule. Friday night, midnight, into Saturday morning. You work midnight to 6 on the weekends. So I got my first shift at KEBC, my dream job. That was the station I wanted to work at my entire life. So I got my first gig. It was awesome. It was in the old station over on Shields Boulevard in Oklahoma City, KEBC. Doing the overnights on the weekends and rocking and rolling and having a DJ's life. Back in those days, it was crazy, too, because, boy, you get some strange phone calls and some strange visitors in the middle of the night. I am here to tell you. Most of the time, it was a bunch of drunks, but nonetheless, I'd been there, done that, and called the radio station at 2 o'clock in the morning myself before. But anyway, next thing you know, the program director changed, and a guy named Eric Logan was going to be the new program director. And he wanted me to do traffic, morning and afternoon drive around the city, report traffic accidents and, construction points and places and things like that. Dodge was coming out with the brand new look Dodge pickups, and Lynn Hickey Dodge was going to be the first ones to get the first dealership to get those new Dodge trucks. Well, KEBC was linked up with Lynn Hickey Dodge, so they got one of the brand new Dodge trucks. Man, they wrapped that thing all up, painted it all up. It looked sharp. It was the KEBC traffic truck. It had my name on the side of the truck. I was doing traffic. Drive around all over Oklahoma City doing traffic. That was way cool. I did that for quite a while. That was a full-time job. I had left KBLP because this was going to be a full-time gig, and Charlie wished me well, and he said, go do it. That was way cool. So I was doing traffic. I had a full-time gig at my dream radio station, KEBC, which was the best part of the whole thing. So I did that. I was at the radio station throughout the day, learning still. I wanted to learn everything I could about the inside workings of a radio station, from turning the mic on, to doing promotions, to doing sales, which I figured out real quick. I'm not a salesman. If one falls in my lap, I can do that. Otherwise, I'm not that door-to-door kind of guy. That's not me. But anyway, I was learning all the insides of that, how music is scheduled, how music goes on the air, what form do they have? I mean, what they get it in an album or a 45 or CDs. Then CDs were coming out then. I mean, how did they get it? So I was learning all of that, but then I wanted to learn how the music's scheduled, how they schedule the music from tempo to tempo, to no two female artists back to back. That was a lot of the rules back then. You couldn't play two slow songs back to back, couldn't play two females back to back, and you sure as hell couldn't play two female slow songs back to back. No, it was not. You had to keep the tempo, and that's what I was trying to learn. I learned the tempo of a radio station. That was really, really interesting to me to learn. And when I learned it, Dave Dodson was teaching me, and Eric Logan was teaching me how to do all this kind of stuff. And they both knew that I was new in radio, but Eric Logan saw something in me that I had not had anybody see in me yet. He saw the drive and the want to learn the business. So Eric made me like the co-music director. Whenever Dave Dodson was out of town or whatever, I got to do the music and the music logs. Because back in those days, you would create a paper music log, print it off, and put it in the control room, and then the jock, as we call him, had to pick the music out of the CDs or records that we had and play them in that certain order. So that was neat. I was the assistant music director. My dad was so proud of me, and that, it came with a lot of perks, like going backstage at major concerts with George Strait and Alan Jackson and all that kind of stuff. And I always took my mom and dad along with me because my dad is the one that got me into loving music the way I do. And I always wanted to pay that forward, pay that back to him in some way or another. And taking him backstage to meet George Strait and Alan Jackson the first time was, man, you couldn't have wiped the smile off of his face for a week. My mother, too. My mother loves Alan Jackson. She loved Elvis. I never got that far. Elvis died before I got into this, but nonetheless. But I always took my parents along when we had these big major concerts, and just the chance to introduce them to these people that they had listened to for so long. In the meantime, there was kind of a groundswelling of what later was known as the red dirt music sound. It's just kind of swelling up in Stillwater a little bit, and I was fortunate enough to meet the guys in the Great Divide. Dave Dodson and I had them in the studio, and they had just finished their first record, and it was so awesome. Dave Dodson and I were sitting in this studio. Dave was actually on the air, and I wasn't doing traffic anymore. I was strictly doing music and working at the station all the time. The first time that the Great Divide was played on the radio, and it was the neatest thing, because we had been around the Great Divide a few times when they played out at different venues and things like that. I just became addicted to that red dirt sound of their music, and so we started going to shows all the time, and I got to introduce them on stage at an old bar in Oklahoma City called In Cahoots. It was one of the happening places then. Had a racetrack dance floor with a bar right in the middle of it, and man, this place was way cool. Anyway, I got to introduce them on stage, and we did a live show on Saturday nights called Saturday Night Live, and it was actually music that was played out of the DJ booth was broadcast down a phone line, digital phone line, back to the radio station, and that was all broadcast on the air, and we would walk around with wireless microphones talking to the crowd, and it was just a big party live on the radio. New concept, never been done before, and it was way cool. It was a lot of fun. As we're doing that, then, it's like I'm working at KBC. Dave Dodson decided he was going to leave. Well, I got to move into the music director's chair. And by this time, I was co-host on the morning show. I worked with a guy named Jim Lago. He's a legend in Texas. And at that time, I did not know that. But after I've been in Texas now for many years, I have heard stories of Jim Lago and run across and worked with some people that had worked with Lago over the years. And boy, he was an ass to me. Man, first time I worked with the guy, he was just difficult. Well, I didn't know that he'd been doing radio for a long time, and he was set in his ways of doing things only a certain way. I get that now. After 34 years, I get that. I'm the same way now. I have my own little ways that I do things. Lago was the same way. I didn't know that at that point. I just thought he was just being an ass to me all the time. We got along okay, though. We had some fun. Oh, we laughed. We did a lot of laughing, that is for sure. And in fact, one morning this has been when the Achy Breaky Heart thing was all out. Billy Ray Cyrus, new to the scene. He had this song, Achy Breaky Heart, and God, we hated that song. Oh, that song was just dreadful. I was like, that ain't country music. That ain't the country music I know anyways. That was kind of the start of a turn of country music. But nonetheless, one morning, Lago said he'd had enough of this shit. I ain't doing it no more. He took the CD out of the player, mid-song, by the way, started another song, took the thing out of the CD player, and then turned the microphone on, and he told the listeners on KABC in our morning show that we are not going to play Billy Ray Cyrus' Achy Breaky Heart anymore. And he broke the CD on the air. Well, the PD happened to be listening. By this time, Eric Logan had already moved to XM Sirius. They had moved us. We'd been bought by Clear Channel Communications, so they moved us up from South Shields up to 50 Penn Place. We're at the 12th or 11th or 12th story of a building in Oklahoma City. So Lago broke the thing. PD's listening. He come walking in there about 10 minutes later. Just like nonchalantly walked over to the cart number or the little jewel case number that Achy Breaky Heart was in. And the jewel case was there, but the CD wasn't in it. So he just nonchalantly put another CD in there and put the thing back in there. And Lago asked him what he was doing. He said, I'm putting Achy Breaky Heart back in here. You say, well, we aren't going to play it anymore, but we are. And Lago says, I'm not going to play it anymore. He goes, well, if it's on your music log, you sure will. He said, no, I won't. Well, they had themselves a little conversation a little bit later on after that, and about a week later, Lago was gone. It was a crazy thing. But in the meantime of that happening, we're on the 12th floor of 50 Penn Place doing our morning show, and our studio was on the southwest corner of this building. And one morning, we were sitting there. We had just finished doing a radio break. And I turned around and was looking out the window, looking at downtown Oklahoma City. And all of a sudden, we heard this boom, and the building shook. Well, granted, we're about 5 miles from downtown. The building shook, and it scared me to death. And I looked at downtown, and there was this big plume of smoke that had gone up. I thought, well, man, that's like a natural gas explosion or something like that. Me and Lago both were like, yeah, that's what it was. Had to have been that. Well, next thing you know, come to find out, I knew this, but had it in the back of my head, that we're in the same building as the FBI office in Oklahoma City. 10 minutes later, we get these agents come rushing in while we're live on the air talking about that, trying to figure out what it was. They came rushing in our room and in our studio and rushed us out, told us, turn the microphones off, get out of the building. We're like, whoa, what's going on here, man? Look at me. Y'all, I am just a couple of years into a radio career, and this is happening. I had no earthly idea what was going on. Well, the building was being evacuated because it was a federal agents were in that building, and they were evacuating the entire building because they didn't know what was going on at that point. So they rushed us out, told Lago and I to go out to Will Rogers Airport and just kind of hang out there in case they saw, like, a suspect or somebody that looked like they were trying to make a mad dash escape out of Oklahoma City, and let them know. All right. Well, Lago and I went out and we sat in the bar out at the at the airport for the rest of the day. It was kind of crazy. And we didn't see anybody. Come to find out, it was Timothy McVeigh had exploded a U-Haul truck in front of the Alfred P. Murrah building down there. I had a cousin that worked right across the street from that. She was just slightly injured, nothing life-threatening or anything like that. But that was the first major event that I had been through on the radio. When they evacuated that building, it was crazy because we had a talk radio station there. I had like 6 radio stations on that one floor. The only person left in that building was one guy on our talk radio station, KTOK. He was the only guy allowed in there. And that guy stayed on the air for hours, a long time. I mean, till they figured out that they captured the guy out north of Oklahoma City up by Guthrie. So he finally got to go home. Lucky him. Whew, man, I don't know. Now I do a morning show in 4 hours, and I'm like, whew, I'm whooped. But nonetheless, okay, so we get that going, and Lago leaves about 2 weeks later. They bring somebody else in. I'm music director, and at this time still, and I didn't want the program director job. I didn't feel like I was, I had the experience, and I really didn't. At that point in my life, I did not have the experience to be a program director. I didn't know what all it entailed at that point. Music director, I can do that. I can do the flow of a radio station and know what not to play back to back and what to play back to back and everything that goes on as being a music director. I got that. I was good with that. So, they were one by one firing all of us from the old KEBC crew on South Shields, one by one. I lasted with Clear Channel, which is now iHeart. I lasted with them about 13 months. And I was the next to last guy from the old crew that was still left there. And they hired a guy from KLLL out in Lubbock. Hired him in. He was a music director in Lubbock. Well, through the grapevine with all my record promoters that I talked to all the time, I found out that he was a music director out there, and I thought, I see the writing on the wall. Yeah, I see how this works. This was going to be my first downfall in radio. Well, about a week and a half into this guy, he was doing 7 to midnight, and I found out that they were just getting him in there and getting him acclimated. That's what they call it. Acclimated. Yeah, they were acclimating him all right. Acclimating him right into my job. I saw the writing on the wall. I'm like, well, this is it. This is it. I was making really good money and just loving life. I'd gone through a divorce, and I was married to my second wife. We had just had a baby, and they came in one day on payday. Now, mind you, I had gone a couple of weeks back here, right about the time they hired this guy. I had a bunch of gold records that I'd gotten from, with my name on them, from record labels, from Alan Jackson, Martina McBride, stuff like that, gold records. They were neat. I love those. I'm one by one, I started taking those out of the office, taking them home with me, because they had my name on them, and I damn sure wasn't going to leave them there if I ever left. So, one day they came walking in. It was a payday, too, as a matter of fact. The operations manager, which his name escapes me right now, and the new music director. Can't even remember what his name was either, because he's just irrelevant in my life. They came walking in. I was literally working. Everything that I needed to work during the day was in a cardboard box, and I kept it under the desk. So every day I would take all that crap and put it under the desk, because I didn't have anything else in there that I needed to take out other than the crap in that cardboard box, right? So he came walking in. I said, Jim, he had a paycheck in his hand. He goes, here's your paycheck, and today is your last day. And I said, hot damn. I scrubbed all that crap that was on my desk off into that cardboard box, took that check out of his hand, and I hit the bricks. He said, hey, Jim, you need to come in tomorrow so we can get your exit interview over with, and we'll do that, and we'll get your severance package to you. And I'm like, all right, cool. I'm going to tell y'all something. At this point, I didn't know what the hell a severance package was. I had no idea. I didn't even know I had one in my contract. Didn't know it was there. So I went back the next day. They paid me a pretty good chunk of money as a severance package to hit the bricks, so to speak. So I hit the bricks home. And I was just like, I'm just gonna sit on my ass for a little while. You know, I mean, I got enough money to last me several months if I need to. So my 30th birthday rolled around, and I was about to go through another divorce, and it was crazy. That was a crazy time, and I just decided, I'm gonna sit on my ass for a little while. So I decided to sit on my butt, and then lo and behold, I was still in contact with a lot of the record promoters from RCA and MCA and all of those folks. That some of them I still work with today, as a matter of fact. Anyway, I had my RCA rep call me, and she says, "Hey, there's a gig open in. I'm living back at my folks' house now in Lexington, Oklahoma. There's a gig open, afternoon drive show, music director." In Wichita Falls at KLUR. I said, really? So I looked it up. That's only a couple hours drive away. That's not bad at all. I said, all right. Well, she goes, you want to interview for it? And I said, sure. So she forwarded there, called them, gave them my phone number, blah, blah, blah. We got hooked up. I drove down to Wichita Falls, interviewed for the afternoon drive and music director gig, and they said, we're going to hire you. We want you to do that. I said, all right, cool. They said, start day will be a couple of weeks. I said, all right. So I showed up that day, and I was ready to go. Afternoon drive, music director. I was going to get affiliated with how they did all their music and everything down there, because that was a legendary station. Big Jim Russell was the king of Wichita Falls radio. Yep, king of the country, KLUR. So I get there. Well, they'd hired Frank Series from Lawton to be the afternoon guy and the music director in the midst of that 2-week span. I love Frank to death. He is an awesome dude, and he did a great job as music director. They said, but we want you to do 7 to midnight. I said, all right, I can do that. So I started doing 7 to midnight. And, it was, I did 7 to midnight for, a couple years, I guess. Maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years, probably 2 years. And Frank took off and went to Nashville. So that moved me into the afternoon drive slot music director. Yeah, the rest is history in Wichita Falls. It was just onward and up from there. So I'm going to end right here. I'll pick up the rest of it on the next edition of Behind the Mic with Nash. Appreciate y'all listening. And we'll pick it up in Wichita Falls on the next episode.